Good evening. It's time for Nightly Muse. Welcome, everyone. Today is Columbus Day, and we're going to talk a little bit about our good old buddy Christopher Columbus, and we will try to get down to the root of what the holiday is about, and should we be celebrating it at all. So it's a challenge because generally people know that uh, I'm someone that's generally compassionate toward uh, other groups of people. Um, I believe, for example, that Black Lives Matter. Um, I believe that the Me Too movement has been one of the most important things that has arrived in the last couple of years. I'm a big supporter of Colin Kaepernick. Um, and there are a number of ways I would like to see uh, the world change and be more compassionate to people in general. However, Columbus Day is an odd one because it celebrates someone who, by many accounts, was a tyrant. Um, he came and essentially uh, conquered the indigenous people of America. And should we be celebrating him at all? So here's my 2 cents worth, and I'd love to hear your comments in the chat box. We'll respond to them. Good evening, Adamus Cap. Hi to you. Thanks for joining us. Great. Now he pops in just to say, I'm too tired. Thanks a lot, there, buddy. Well, that's okay. It is 11 o'clock, and I recognize old men have to be in bed. Just kidding. So, anyhow, Columbus Day. Should we be celebrating it at all? And I'm here to say yes. But let me say it with a caveat. The spirit of Columbus is important, an important thing to celebrate for 2 reasons. First of all, it's essentially Columbus Day is a day that's celebrated by a lot of Italian Americans. Columbus was a bit of a hero to them. And that's one reason is that there are lots of celebrations that are focused on specific ethnic groups, and realizing that taking one of those celebrations away is hurtful to another group of people, just as celebrating Columbus is hurtful to the indigenous populations of the country. There's a movement right now that is pushing for Indigenous Peoples Day, that to be held at the same day that of Columbus Day, to celebrate them. And I think that that's a great movement. I think, however, that the indigenous people of North America should celebrate another day. I don't think that we should be forced to make a choice between celebrating one thing and celebrating another. Um, let's put this in context, first of all. Christopher Columbus came to America, and some of the things he did here were bad. Some of the things that happened because he arrived were bad. But at the same time, he ushered in um, the growth that ultimately created North America, to be what it is today. Had it not been for the Spaniards and then later the English and the French uh, settling North America, it would have lagged behind, similar to um, you know, I look at the African continent and the way it's in turmoil, um, and it's because much of it was left untouched by the Europeans. And at that point in our history, the Europeans were the most advanced culture on the planet, um, and their culture spread. It was more, people get upset about colonialism, but in fact, that's not quite accurate. The reality is progress spreads. Um, it's no more colonialist than today, where we see young African kids running around in soccer T-shirts, Nike shoes, and drinking Coca-Cola. Our culture, um, not as Americans, but just as the most progressed uh, societies, spreads organically, and so yeah, it's uh, I yes, Columbus came on a ship. Yes, many people were killed, um, but in a sense, that's progress. It was kind of inevitable. I think what to celebrate about Columbus was his spirit of exploration. And I would be very much in favor of changing Columbus Day to Explorers Day, because if you look at that period in the world history, um, the great explorers were charting the world for the first time. Most of them were European, but it's a situation um, where we want to uh, celebrate the spirit of exploration, um, both at that time and today. The other piece about Columbus that we have to consider is the context. Columbus did some bad stuff. Columbus also brought a lot of disease. While they were staking their claim here, millions of people died as a result of diseases that they weren't immune to, that were brought with them on the ships. It was pretty catastrophic, far beyond what Columbus did on purpose. Um, yeah, it was horrible. But look at the world in 1492. Columbus got money from the Queen of Spain, and that was because the oligarchs in his country didn't didn't want to fund the voyage. Um, as such, he had an obligation to expand the Spanish kingdom. That was his job. Furthermore, this is at a time where there were no democracies. Things weren't fair. To put Columbus up to a standard of today and how we treat people is kind of ridiculous, considering that the vast majority of people were peasants, and we were only a few hundred years removed from half of Europe dying from disease. And what we're seeing is that among the things that Columbus did that were bad, at that time, and put in that context, he wasn't necessarily a bad human being. He was a human being making his way in a world that was very, very difficult and very unfair at the time. So let's talk about the Native Americans a bit, the indigenous people of North America. And is it fair to them? Absolutely not. What happened is definitely not fair. But at the same time, let's celebrate those people in a way that's constructive and helpful. And I fully support a federal holiday that celebrates America's first residents. I think that rather than calling it Indigenous Peoples Day, we should focus on some of the great leaders and bringing them into our history books that were Native American chiefs and the men and women that helped create America and what it is today, based on creating a part of our culture that is incredibly important. Sometime take out a map and read the names of cities and towns. Start in Philadelphia and travel west from Conshohocken out to Shamokin, out to up to Lake Wallenpaupack, and then head west, and you're going to see, for every name of a town that was founded by an Englishman or a Frenchman or a Spaniard, you're going to see towns and communities and rivers and lakes named after the Native American words for those areas. My kids go to Chief Shikellamy High School, and Chief Shikellamy was a Native American chief that worked with the settlers to as a negotiator and as a looking for ways to connect the natives that were living here with the people who were settling this area in the 1700s. But there are lots of great Native Americans, and we need to find a handful of them and create a national holiday that celebrates those individuals as well as the life and the culture of Native Americans. I look at Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and you realize that of the millions of African Americans, Martin Luther King Jr. was just one representative of that culture. However, he was a great man and he personified uh, the most positive aspects of, of Black history in the civil rights movement. Were there other men and women that were African American that are just as important? Probably. But if we simply called it Black History Day, that wouldn't resonate with people. We wouldn't have that identity that's so important. So I'd like to see us come up with an idea for a true Indigenous Peoples holiday and find an individual that represents the best of that culture and also represents how Native Americans have been an incredibly important part of America as a whole. So that's my 2 cents for tonight. I'd love to have some comments and questions. If any of you would care to jump in. So absolutely, please feel free to comment. Do you have any ideas about what cultures, what individuals would best represent the Native American culture? I'm all ears. I'd love to hear it. Meanwhile, I think we can celebrate Columbus Day. He was an imperfect hero, absolutely. But his imperfections doesn't mean that he isn't deserving somewhat of celebration. His spirit of exploration was incredibly important then, and it is incredibly important today. So I hope that we keep exploring and keep searching and keep looking for the next Columbus. But let's not forget that all came at a price, and that we need to find ways of honoring the people who were hurt by that very same exploration and colonization. We're going to sign out on this Monday night. I wish all of you a happy Columbus Day. And to my friends and loved ones that have that rich, extra thick Native American blood running through their veins, I want to wish you a happy Indigenous Peoples Day. And I fully respect if you choose not to celebrate. And I hope that we can somehow honor your contributions as a society to America. Have a great night, everyone. Thanks.